Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study, live with the leader of the African nation, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The theme of our discussion is Build and Consolidate the African People's Socialist Party, Part 1. Chairman Omali Yeshitela will guide us through the similarly titled document, reviewing pages 1 through 26. The PDF is accessible via link in the description. This pamphlet was published in 1986, with portions appearing in the Burning Spear newspaper. Revolutions and political parties are not a random occurrence. The conditions for revolution and the need for political parties can be explained scientifically, and it's African internationalist science that Chairman Omali uses to provide answers to key questions: whether the revolution is necessary or possible, the social forces to lead said revolution, and the organizational vehicle required to exercise that leadership. For the last 50 years, the African People's Socialist Party has served as the advanced detachment of the African working class, the organizational vehicle required to exercise the leadership of the African working class to create the conditions for and successfully make a worldwide African revolution. Comrades, the time to study and understand these critical questions is right now. We must grasp our own significance as members or supporters of the African People's Socialist Party, the broader Uhuru movement, and the worldwide anti-colonial struggle that's unfolding. We'll start with reading with the chairman, then break for announcements before going into question and answers. Last thing before we start, make sure you're hitting that like, that follow, subscribe, and/or share button to do your part in getting the word out about this study. I am honored now to introduce the founder of the African People's Socialist Party, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you very much, Comrade Akile, for the introduction. And I want to express appreciation to all of you who have come on to this study. It is my hope that different party organizations around the world will not only participate in this discussion and study as individuals, but also would initiate group studies, group discussions, because this pamphlet was one of several produced in the 1980s in particular as a part of the process of building and consolidating the African People's Socialist Party itself. And it was designed as a training to help people come to terms, to understand what the Revolutionary Party is, the fact that there needs to be a party, and what the membership of a party should be about, what the class content of an organization that presupposes its responsibility to make the revolution. Can just any group of people be characterized as revolutionary simply because they can talk Black, or because they can quote Marx or Lenin, or because they can quote Marcus Garvey or Malcolm X? What is it that makes an actual revolutionary? And what are the conditions within which revolutionary functions? Organization is the critical aspect of that. And that's why you know, and I know, that many individuals and groups who characterize themselves as revolutionaries definitely cannot be serious, or cannot be seriously considered revolutionaries, even though they may be quite militant and bold in their activities and actions, because just like fish needs water, revolutionaries have organization. Organization is the fundamental necessity for making revolution. And organizations are not just any kind of organization, but organizations also that are filled with individuals who function as cadre, prepared to do whatever is necessary to forward the aims of the revolution. Organizations that's comprised of individuals whose profession is revolution, professional revolutionaries, despite the fact that they may be occupied in any kinds of different things. So we're talking about what it takes to win our freedom. This is effectively what this discussion is about. And it's, in some instances, many people perhaps don't understand the whole notion of freedom and what freedom is and what are we talking about. I heard of a very famous, very courageous woman who I would consider revolutionary was quoted, people played this quote on social media about what is a revolutionary. What is the revolution? I've heard her answer something about how the revolution is something that allows individuals to be whatever they want to be, to do whatever they want to do, etc. And that's really, despite my love and appreciation for this comment, it's really petty bourgeois definition of what freedom and what a revolutionary is all about. It's not a self-serving thing for us as individuals. People come into revolutionary organizations. Many times they come to satisfy some deep inner need that they may have as individuals. But if those needs that we have as individuals don't contribute to overturning a social system, to liberating and freeing the people, then it's not revolution. It can be people who have been able to die, fight, and kill to satisfy inner needs. But the question is whether or not such work, such struggle, such satisfaction contributes to changing the social system and liberating the masses of our people. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a party of revolutionaries. I attended a meeting on yesterday that was hosted here right now where I'm in St. Louis at the Uhuru House, Aquaba Hall. For those of you who may not know, of course, Uhuru in Swahili is freedom, and Aquaba in Tree means welcome. So here at Aquaba Hall, that's extraordinary meeting. A whole lot of people were here. You know, young people. It was primarily young people, and other people were here as well. Mostly Africans, but others as well attended this. And it was an appreciation of volunteers. That's how it was put forth and characterized. And as I sat there in this meeting, I was reminded of the role of the party. Because it was the party that was conceived more than 50 years ago. That was at a time where the revolution, African revolution, was under siege and people were being assassinated and murdered and arrested because of a commitment to revolution. It was this party that said that despite the fact that people like Malcolm and people like King and people who would be members of the Black Panther Party in Africa and Jomo and other revolutionary organizations were in many instances being killed, that the African People's Socialist Party was founded to complete the struggle for our freedom. It was not created to get likes or views on social media. It was to make the struggle for our freedom. And so people were at the height of this struggle, the United States government initiated a campaign of murder, of suppression, of arresting people to stop it. And what they had to stop was not just people being active, but people being active independently of the direction that's provided normally and naturally in an oppressive and colonial society, independent of the institutions that have been created by our oppressor that give the impression of motion like a treadmill, where you can be in motion, but you're never going anyplace. And so that's why Panthers were killed, not because they were active. There were all kinds of active forces who were not killed. That's why Lawrence Mann, one of the co-founders of the African People's Socialist Party, was killed, not because he was working and organizing migrants. There were other people who were doing that. But the question is, what were the objectives and what would be the conclusion of the work that they were doing? And so this is why forces were wiped out. And so I'm sitting up to take this out of place so that we could not get to masses. In fact, if you look at the counterintelligence program that was initiated in terms of the goals of that counterintelligence program by the FBI developed in the 1960s, you would see that part of what it was about was preventing the rise of significance of black, it's what they call militant black nationalist organizations, black nationalist leadership, black nationalist coalitions, black nationalist movement that would bring young people into it, et cetera. That's what it was about. It was to take us off and destroy our organizations. And in fact, at one time, J. Edgar Hoover, was the leader of the notorious domestic political police organization called the FBI, had declared that their job was to let every young African know that become a revolutionary is to be a dead revolutionary. So the thing was to stop a revolutionary movement. Even though this preceded things like social media, the objective was not to keep social media from happening. In fact, the government created social media. The objective was not that. The objective was not to prevent people from getting likes or even being liked. The objective was to make sure that whatever was liked and whomever was liked was towing the line, that functions as accomplices of a colonial oppression. And so here I am, and I saw that. I mean, you know, I was there when people like Fred was assassinated. When people were chased out of the country. I was in and out of prison every other day, every other week I was in and out of prison. So I was there and saw all of this. And all of this was designed to crash the struggle of people, African people, Black people, and other people around the world, because this is happening simultaneously to other revolutionary forces around the world who just kind of break free from this colonial mode of production. And so we say that our movement was defeated militarily. The Black Revolution of the 1960s was military defeated. Some people have problems recognizing and uniting with that, but it's true. I mean, it was significant. Malcolm's death was incredibly significant. King's death was incredibly significant. The assassination of Black leaders, the arrest of masses of people. We don't even know how many people went to prison during that time. How many people were killed during that time? I'm just talking about the United States. I'm not talking about all around the world where 1 million people were killed in Indonesia alone with the assistance of the American CIA. So this massive attack on the struggle of people to bring us back into line, to lock us into this relationship with the colonial mode of production had been successful. And even to the point that when you get this notion of somehow Black people winning democracy because we can vote now, even the right to vote was something that was made possible, that was made necessary by the struggle of African people to overturn the relationship that included voting, to be free of the whole thing. And so at the time, 1965, the Voting Rights Act passed. Black people can now at least, formally participate in elections, even though you see you can't do that. Increasingly, you see what the governments around this country are doing to undermine the capacity even to vote. But that did happen in the 1960s. But it didn't just happen. It made sure that the program that Black people would be fighting for had been eliminated, or neutralized, or undermined, and the organizations and leaders that would take us to a place, even within the electoral process, were taken out of place. So 1965, Voting Rights Act passed, but Malcolm X was killed in 1965. 1968, King is killed. In 1960s, we see all of these arrests and murders, assassinations of Black people put into prison. And this is the time they say you can vote, but you got nothing to vote for and nobody to vote for. And that new organization now is the only legitimate organization, the Democratic Party. And even today, the membership of the Democratic Party, 25% of this membership are Africans. They're not members of the African People's Socialist Party. They're not members of any revolutionary organization because the revolution was destroyed. But last night, back to yesterday, being in this event, is all these people, I don't know how many people were there. I know we seated for 80 or so. I don't know if there were 80 people in the meeting, in the room, and not here at the Quabbin Hall. There were a lot of people. And awards were being given to people as volunteers. Now, you know that volunteers you can find all the time. People can volunteer and they can get special grades for in colleges and universities, and they can get satisfy requirements of courts who have sentenced them to do some kind of community service. They can volunteer all kinds of things, but they've never had an opportunity since the military defeat of the African Revolution to volunteer in an anti-colonial program, an anti-colonial process. That's what the party has to do. The party brings masses of people into the revolutionary project. Some people are locked into some outmoded notion of what the revolution looks like. But what the revolution looks like is the masses of African people, the masses of the oppressed, actively engaged in independent political life that challenges the relationships and status and the institutions of colonialism. So that was really powerful. And that's the kind of thing that a party is supposed to be able to do. A party cadre is supposed to be able to do. Take that kind of initiative. And I see it every now and then. I don't see it enough, but I see it every now and then. And that's the basis, by the way, of us having this discussion. And that was a hell of a long intro to this. But I think it's really important for us to understand this, because some of us are locked into outdated concepts of what the revolution looks like. But things have changed tremendously since the 1960s, the high tide of revolutionary struggle in the 1960s. I know that people have lied. Matula Shakur is supposed to be out of prison, and they still is not out of prison. They're letting him die. The objective is to make sure that his prison sentence is a death sentence. In the same way they killed Lynn Stewart. They made sure that even as they knew, and this is a lawyer who was charged and imprisoned as active terrorism for defending a client. And she didn't just defend clients; she defended clients who were imprisoned in jail for anti-colonial activity. And so, as a white woman. And so she ends up being in prison. She's got breast cancer. They know it. They know she needs to get out, get treatment, and they make sure that they don't let her out. They keep her there for a long period of time. So it's a death sentence. We got people like Sonia Okoli, one of the most heroic human beings I have ever met in my life. Little old guy. And this is the guy who was stopped on the New Jersey Turnpike along with Sada Shakur. Was that 1972? Who defended Sada and defended other people in that car from the highway patrol, leaving a highway patrolman dead after at least one of them had shot Sada with her hands up to kill her. And so, you know, these are the forces, and now we look at these people are dying and they're so-called being let out of prison. But the point is that what they did was they let the genie out of the bottle, and you can't put it back in by putting them in jail and keeping them in jail and keeping them in prison for a long period of time. That's what Fred Hampton meant. We said, you can kill a revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. You can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail a revolution. Revolution, that genie is out of the bottle. And it's represented in the real world by the activities of the African People's Socialist Party. And so here we see Matulu Shakur, them refusing to let him out at least for a few days, a few weeks that he can spend with his family and loved ones. Sunyata, they let him rot in prison. The most heroic men and women that you would ever know. Sada, even in Cuba, having to hide for her life. So now we see all of the work that they have done and all of the work that the African People's Socialist Party has done to continue that which was supposed to have destroyed the revolution. And this is really important to understand. It was intended to destroy the revolution. That's why they locked up Sundiata. That's why they locked up Matula. That's why they tried to kill Asada to destroy the revolution. That's why they are political prisoners and prisoners of war, to destroy the revolution, to destroy the ability of Black people and oppressed people to be free. That's why Lynn Peltier is in prison today. It's because of that. And that's really important to understand, because sometimes even when people are locked up for a long period of time,
revolutionary organizations have been destroyed, and there seems to be, at some time, just in practical terms, no basis for their continuing to struggle, even as they're in prison. Sometimes then the question is, how do we get this person out of prison? This becomes the central issue. How do I get out of prison? This becomes the central issue, not how to forward the revolution, but that wasn't always the case. That's why Attica was such a hot spot. That's why in the state of Florida, they had to attack these prisons, because when they were arresting revolutionaries, they put them in prisons, and the revolutionaries took the revolution into the prison system. But to the extent that they could neutralize most of that, then we had individuals now having to concentrate on themselves, their families having to concentrate on how to get them out, because the revolutionary organizations are dead. But what we are saying is that the revolution is alive, and part of what that manifests today was just an example, just a simple program here in North St. Louis, where a lot of people came together to celebrate volunteering to participate in carrying out anti-colonial democratic program. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. And I wanted to share that, and I want to acknowledge, comrades like Bakri Olatunji, who's on and been here for a long time with the party, and Yindu, one of the founding members of the African People's Socialist Party. I see you are there. I've been told you're there. I can't see you. So the people who I don't mention now is because I can't see you. I don't have my computer, but someone told me before this began of the people who were there. I know that there are group studies being done in Africa. And I want to salute you. I want to salute you in Sierra Leone and other places in West Africa. I want to salute you in Southern Africa, Swaziland, and in South Africa as it's characterized. I don't know if there are members of our movement who there in various other places right now on the continent, but I want to salute you. I know that there are people in the Caribbean, comrades who are there. This is your party. This is what we're talking about. And even though much of what we're talking about, this document was written in 1986. And so we will quote some documents that some aspects are outdated. For example, we'll say that some passage, something we are mentioning it can be found in a certain section of the Constitution as it was in 1986. So that may not be the same, might not be the same section or the same part of the Constitution, but the basic things that we say here are still relevant, and they still are somewhere in that Constitution. Let's look at this. 1986 is what we're talking about. So we said, I'm reading now, so those of you who have access, and everybody should have access to the document. During the first week of July 1986, the party held a much needed national conference in St. Petersburg, Florida, that was attended by party representatives from various regions of the United States. Among the significant decisions at the conference was the determination to hold the party's second Congress in St. Petersburg, Florida, during the second week of January. This decision and the process used to come to it ends a period of shaky attempts to convene our second Congress, which was actually due as long ago as 1984. The party Congress is an awesome occurrence. It is the time when the party membership comes together to establish the general policies of the party, to examine the party's past work, and to establish new directions. The party's Congress is also the place where the most important, far-ranging reports to the African People's Socialist Party organization are made by the party's national leadership. These reports are then accepted or rejected. It is the place where the party's membership will elect its national leadership. In the party's national leadership, in accordance with the law of the party, as found in the party's constitution, which was accepted at the party's first Congress in 1981. For all these reasons and more, The party Congress is an occurrence which requires a tremendous amount of attention, leadership, and work by the national party organization, which has that responsibility. But at least equally as important, building for the Congress also requires the maximum input and participation from the party's membership. The men and women who carry out the day-to-day distribution of the party's press, that is our newspaper, that is the Burning Spear, and attempt to provide the leadership for the struggle of our colonial oppressed people throughout the communities, prisons, workplaces, and campuses within the US, as we were speaking at the time. The party's constitution provides for participation of party membership by law with the requirements of Section 3 of Article 4 and Section 2 of Article 6. According to Section 3, Article 4, quote, prior to each national Congress, a 3-month period shall be provided for discussion in all party organizations and leading party committees on the main resolution, the party program and constitution, to adopt resolutions on all questions of party policy for consideration by the Congress, unquote. Then Section 2 of Article 6 reads, 2 months prior to the National Party Congress, whenever applicable, a special regional party Congress convention will be held in each of the party's 6 designated regions. The purpose of the meeting shall be to discuss all issues of concern for the region and the national party organization, to propose resolutions highlighting special regional issues, etc. However, notwithstanding these constitutional provisions, a revolutionary party of national liberation and socialism as small as the African People's Socialist Party and as limited in experience and Congress work required more than these constitutional provisions. In situations such as ours, where the party Congress has not become an actual tradition and where no such tradition exists within the Black Liberation Movement, the African People's Socialist Party Central Committee, the party's leading elected national body, saw the need to win the party's membership to the significance of the Congress and the need to build for it and participate in it. So part of what we're seeing is that this was a major and is a major contribution that the African People's Socialist Party makes to the African Revolution. Just the Congress itself, just organizing this where there is no tradition of this existing in our movement as such for national liberation to do this. And so that was really important. Hence, the Florida conference last month quickly revealed the correctness of the Central Committee's decision and resulted in an enthusiastic several days of meetings and struggles, which consolidated the understanding that central to all the party's work for the next few months is building for the party's second Congress. As we approach the party's second Congress, we do so as a party whose place in history has already been determined by its magnificent deeds. We approach the party's second Congress with many strengths and the promise of an excellent and promising future. But we also approach the Congress with weaknesses and shortcomings, which must be overcome, or even the strengths which should serve us, and the glorious African Revolution will turn into their opposite and become weaknesses. For 14 years now, since 1972, the African People's Socialist Party has held up the genuine interests of our colonized people and fought concrete battles for concrete results for our revolution. And so when people look at the African People's Socialist Party, one of the things that has been, and the Uhuru movement, one of the things that's been striking is the fact that we look at now a Black Power blueprint that's centered in St. Louis, but it's a part of a blueprint that was established long time ago. I mean, you can go back to the history of the party and see that this is the kind of work that we've been doing that chips away at the significance and influence and power of the colonizer and gains power and influence for the colonized over our own lives. And so, you know, it's not enough to just be able to bullet mouth and to make these great speeches, to know what's happening in Afghanistan and all the details and of that. The thing is that when we're talking about engaging in struggle, what we are looking is we're fighting concrete battles for concrete results. Concrete. How does it manifest itself in the world? What are we doing in the world? Not just having a discussion, not being just social media militants, which serves more than anything, it serves to isolate us, isolate the people from each other. So you no longer have a relationship with people, you have a relationship with a computer screen. And the computer screens tell you whether you're being successful or not, and depending on how many likes you get, depending on how many views you get, as opposed to what's built concretely on the ground with concrete relationships with people who you can touch, who you can engage with. Concretely, we have organized among the masses of our people on the jobs, the campuses, and in the prisons and communities. We have intervened in the spontaneous struggles of the masses around virtually every question and attempted to enhance the fighting capacity of the people with proper revolutionary leadership. Enhance the fighting capacity of the people. That's what was done in part when we marched through North St. Louis with the march for reparations and with the slogan, hands off Uhuru, talking about the FBI, hands off Africa. This is concretely what we're doing and bringing masses of people into this relationship with us, which is critical. And so people who didn't see us and won't see us, wouldn't have seen us on social media, they might be inclined to go to social media now to get a better understanding if they didn't get it from the flyers that were being passed out and the actual organizing that had to be done with people to make this thing successful. So we have attempted, so we're talking about enhancing the fighting capacity of the people. This is what gives the people the opportunity, the training, the know-how to engage with the colonizer. We have intervened in the spontaneous struggles of the masses. We have intervened in the spontaneous struggles of the masses around virtually every question and attempted to enhance the fighting capacity of the people with proper revolutionary leadership. Spontaneous struggle. Canfield Drive, right here in Ferguson, after they murdered Mike Brown. We were there. In Philadelphia, after they bombed Africans in the MOVE organization in the 1980s, 85, we were there. We built there. That's how we got to Philadelphia. That's how we got to St. Louis, where we are now, to involve ourselves in the spontaneous struggles and then provide revolutionary leadership, because the question that we had to ask in St. Louis, in Ferguson, was as people were engaged in spontaneously in struggle, to what end? To what end? To what end? Where the hell are we going and to bring science to that, to provide that kind of leadership? We have attempted, with more or less success, the final tally is not yet in, to forge a revolutionary consciousness and scientific African internationalist worldview upon every struggle against police terror, tenant abuse, neo-colonialist chicanery, etc. We fight the neo-colonial. That's what the campaigns that we were involved in part in St. Petersburg, Florida. When we ran candidates for office, we didn't just run against the colonizers directly. We ran against the neo-colonial forces who occupied our communities and function as agents of our oppressors and oppression. We did that. Did it in St. Louis and what have you. We have fought to make every battle for healthcare, students' rights, an end to the death penalty and freedom for Black political prisoners and prisoners of war, a stepping stone for the transformation of every Black community within the United States into fighting Soviets for political independence, African liberation, and socialism. And I just want to say that part of what this attack on the African People's Socialist Party on July 29th was a statement by the government that we have been successful in transforming these communities into independent fighting Soviets for independence, for freedom against colonialism, and they recognize that that's part of why they had to attack us. And this is concrete. Even the thing that I referenced earlier, the meeting that just happened yesterday where we were awarding so people who are characterized as volunteers. These are not just ordinary volunteers, though they come in as ordinary people. They have the ability, because the party is here, they have the ability to volunteer against colonialism. That is magnificent. That's what the African People's Socialist Party has done up to this time. I want to try to be move a lot more expeditiously. So we have led, and in the African community, here we are in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm mentioning St. Louis in particular, but we can go to St. Petersburg, Florida. We can go to Folkville in Township in South Africa, and Houghton in South Africa, and various other places. And what we have done is arm masses of working class people. This is the most dispossessed and despised sector of the African population. Sometimes the assault on the African population is so effective in terms of the psychological war that's been waged, because that's a serious component of it. It's so effective that African people internalize this hatred of ourselves as workers and have no respect and confidence in ourselves as workers, even though we built every damn thing. Workers built it. The Black professors didn't build it. The Black stock people didn't build it. It was African workers who created everything of value that we see in this world right now. It has its foundation on what workers have done. And what the significance of the working class has been so reduced. You know why it's been reduced and how? Because the emergence of the so-called capitalist system came off what? Slavery. Colonial slavery. Colonial slavery gave rise to the whole so-called capitalist working class. So part of what colonialism does also as a part of a superstructure is engender hatred of the working class, because the working class was Black people, Africans who were enslaved, and so therefore workers have no dignity. There's no sense of significance of the workers, and that's something that we should all understand. So we have led successful struggles to free political prisoners, which have lifted the morale of our whole people and our movement, even during periods of political retreat. Somebody has a slogan, something about no compromise, no retreat. So it's a take on the slogan that we introduced. Actually, that came from the Pan-Africanist Congress of Tanzania: no compromise, no surrender. But you retreat. You're crazy if you don't retreat. You're out of your mind if you don't retreat. That's what guerrillas do. I mean, guerrillas don't stand and fight and go up against an overwhelming force. When you see it coming, you retreat. As the comrade said, when we were engaged in the struggle in St. Petersburg, Florida, after they had murdered Marquel, I think it was Marquel, what was his last name? McCullough. And masses that came down they passed by the Hoover House and said, is it on? Is it on? Is it on? They wanted to engage the oppressor. And they did engage. And then when we were talking to people about how wise it was, or whether it was wise to confront these forces like this, when we knew they were waiting, people said, don't worry about it, said we hook and move. We hook and move. You understand? This is how we do it. This is what Muhammad Ali does. We put some Muhammad Ali, we sting, like a bee, right? And float like a butterfly. That's what the revolution is all about. You understand? And so you retreat. And I'm trying to remember even a song, that one of the reggae songs that somebody has made, and we used to say, what about run away and live to fight another day? So anyway, that's another story. I'm off on something else now. So the party led struggles to free Pitts and Lee from death row and prison in the state of Florida, and Jesse H. Woods from prison in the state of Georgia, won international respect for the party and gave concrete meaning to revolutionary African internationalism during a period when the people were being asked to accept the revolutionary declarations of organizational faith alone. Listen, we were extraordinarily effective at a time when the revolution was supposed to be dead in 1917. Pitts and Lee is a glaring example that scared the death of the ruling class. And the fact is that even though eventually what they did was they freed Pitts and Lee because the Miami Herald wrote this article on Pitts and Lee. Here, 2 Africans were locked up, and at this time had been locked up for 12 years on death row for something a white man had already confessed to. But it was the African People's Socialist Party on the ground, on a daily basis, chased the governor of the state of Florida, Reuben Askew, who had been chosen by the Trilateral Commission to be the one who was going to be their response to the Republican Party Southern strategy in Florida. He was going to be the one, the Southern cracker, who was going to bring other white people to the Democratic Party in a presidential election, something that hadn't happened in years since Nixon initiated the Southern strategy, since George Wallace had been such a threat. And so here's Reuben Askew. I mean, we crashed this inauguration, but Reuben Askew called for a meeting with me. We met with Reuben Askew in his office, and I'm in Reuben Askew's office, and end up in a wrestling match with the sheriff in his office. We hounded Reuben Askew to such a point that they had to free Pitts and Lee. Otherwise, we would have ruined Reuben Askew's opportunity to become this candidate, this Democratic Party nominee for the presidency. We did other stuff too. That's why one of the reasons I'm not in prison is because during this time, I was out on appeal bond for tearing that mural down. I was in and out of prison. I was out on appeal bond. And there was this African man who is familiar with some of the Africans who are watching this now. His name is Claude Anderson. He has written a couple of books on Black economics and things like this. He worked in Reuben Askew's office at the time. And while I got this phone call from Claude Anderson, and Anderson said, look, we understand that the governor that you're preparing to march on the governor's mansion, don't march on the governor's mansion. March on the Capitol instead. Because if you march on the governor's mansion, it's clear that you're targeting Askew. I said, well, we hadn't had any plans to march on the governor's mansion, but I said, we can't give any attention to changing plans like that. Right now, we're fighting this case of me going to prison. He said, when are you supposed to go? I told him. He said, who's the judge? I told him. He said, don't worry about it. And I got to the courtroom. And this would have been in 1973, if I'm not mistaken. I got to the courtroom, and the judge, I couldn't think of his name after a while, he said, first thing came out of his mouth, because I'm supposed to be re-sentenced to prison again. He said something to the effect that things have changed so much now, Mr. Waller, from when you tore the mural down, and Mr. Waller, all this, et cetera, et cetera. He said, we're just gonna let it go time served. I said, right on, Judge, you understand? Anyway, we've been engaged in a very serious way all the time. So that's around the whole thing, Pitts and Lee, all of this stuff. And the movement's supposed to be dead. This is what you really must understand. In the 1970s, the movement's supposed to be dead. Jesse Woods, Pitts and Lee, we led those struggles and organized, various other kinds of campaigns. The party's campaign around U.S. African political prisoners and prisoners of war ignited a new, if sometimes transient interest in the fate of Black Liberation Army captives such as Sundiata Acoli, Assata Shakur, Herman Bell, Deruva Moore, Albert Washington, Anthony Bottom. This was written in 1986. Some people think that they just discovered the political prisoner and prisoner war issue And they said, where are you? You know, where are you? We've been championing this question. We were the leaders when nobody else was there. We were there. And there's more that could be said about that. We have built mass organizations of tactical and strategic significance to the struggle for African liberation. It was the African People's Socialist Party which finally moved in a meaningful way on the historic demand by our people for reparations from U.S. imperialism for criminal abuse and for the value of the stolen labor, which have been the consequence of U.S. domestic colonialism, or what is referred to by the Vietnamese as internal colonization. Our party built the World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the United States in 1982 and provided the leadership for the founding of the African National Reparations Organization, ANRO, which has since made the sessions of the World Tribunal an institution of our movement. African People's Socialist Party did this. We did it almost alone, even though we tried to do it with other forces who were supposed to be a part of the anti-colonial Black liberation pro-independence movement, because we are a party of the revolutionary working class. We were informed by tactics and strategies to make the revolution, not just to have an event. Every event was tied somehow to the strategic objectives of overturning our relationship with colonialism. And although ANRO continues to have its problems, there are problems which are mostly, though not totally, due to the period within which we live and struggle. And I just said something about the period within which we live and struggle, and which ANRO itself attempts to respond with its existence. There are problems having to do with the domination of petty bourgeois opportunism, which has followed the defeat of the Black working class revolutionary movement of the 1960s. But however significant ANRO's problems may be, they cannot detract from the reality that the Black liberation movement, the oppressed, colonized African workers and people, have a party which is capable of building mass organizations which can become training grounds of struggle for the people and provide our revolution with invaluable reserve forces. The African People's Socialist Party became the only revolutionary party, certainly the first, that had a capacity of building mass organizations. This is the only thing that kept us from being trapped into a retreat, so that we found ourselves having to fight over and over again the democratic struggles of the past. This is why the party hasn't had to go back and then rebuild a civil rights movement. The party leads the civil rights movement. We're not part of a civil rights movement. For the first time, we have the ability to say we're going to have a civil rights movement that's not just bound to winning rights and democracy within the colonial context. We have a civil rights movement that takes the people to a higher level of revolutionary consciousness and organization, and creates at the same time a reserve force for the party, for the revolution. This is what it is that we do, what it is that we're about. That's the significance of that. So we say that 10 years ago, in 1976, the African People's Socialist Party formed the African People's Solidarity Committee, APSC, a cadre organization of North American white people who express strategic unity with the aspirations of our people for African liberation, political independence, and socialism by working directly under the leadership of our Central Committee. With the founding of APSC, the party added another concrete demonstration of our ongoing struggle to solve the problems of the revolution. Solve the problems of the revolution. Initially, the founding of APSC simply responded to the strategic requirements of our movement to break out of the imperialist encirclement imposed on it with the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s. Do you understand that? The encirclement, that the African liberation movement was being killed, wiped out, leaders destroyed. Where was the outrage? Where was the organization of the murder of Malcolm X? Where was the outrage other than what you saw, the spontaneous rebellions of African people after they murdered King? Where was the outrage when I say outrage, I'm talking about from the colonizers. I'm talking about from the white left. I'm talking about all those SWP people who love Malcolm X. When they murdered Malcolm, what did we see? from any of those forces at all. And so that was because they had been able to encircle our movement, kill off the Black Revolution, separate the struggle for African liberation from the struggle for world progress, which of course is being led by the colonized people of the world, because the great contest is that between the oppressor, the colonial oppressors, and those of us who are colonized. The great statement of progress will be measured by the extent to which we end the colonial domination of the peoples of the world. That's where you look at progress. Don't tell me something about some progressive capitalist, some progressive colonizer, something to that point. So anyway, so initially we had to break out of this encirclement. We had to make it difficult, if not impossible, for them to kill and attack the Black Revolution without some kind of consequence within the white population as well. In 1977, I summed up this strategic objective in a popular pamphlet titled Tactics and Strategy for Black Liberation in the US. And I'm quoting now. Another strategic objective for winning independence, which is what anti-colonial struggle is all about, which should guide our work, is to win support for the independence position within current US borders. We want to win people to unite, not just with, don't treat Black people bad stuff, but support for the struggle of independence. That's an anti-colonial demand. Support the struggle against colonialism. Quote, because we have been bogged down, this is the pamphlet, because we have been bogged down in primitive race politics. This is 1986. Because we have been bogged down in primitive race politics as opposed to revolutionary nationalist politics. Some of us will reject the idea of winning support for the independence movement within current US borders. And yeah. Some will see winning support as meaning the same as winning acceptance, which is the slavist philosophy put forth by the integrationists. However, I assure you there's a distinctive difference to win acceptance correctly implies capitulation, non-struggle, and national self-abasement. But winning support means political persuasion, ideological struggle, and principled political relations which respond to a convergence of interests and a commitment to socialist and international morality. Struggling to win support for the independence position as a strategic objective for independence through self-liberation will help to sharpen our ideological development, smash the narrowness of our worldview, and demand continuity in our principles of unity. The main target for this effort to win support for the independence position should be the general anti-imperialist forces within current US borders, other oppressed, subject, and colonized nationalities, and progressive US North Americans. Win support. Later, in a 1979 report to the party's theoretical development concerning the basis of our relationship to APSC was stated by me in this way, quote, assumption of the leadership of party solidarity work by the APSC and the party's closer supervision over APSC reflected many of the lessons the party had learned, had been learning through our struggles within the solidarity movements and around the question of solidarity. These and other struggles the party was involved in led us to a deeper theoretical understanding of the basis for APSC existence and the relationship APSC has to the party. So we mentioned the strategic significance of that. Now what we're seeing is that these struggles that we're involved in deepens our understanding, takes us to a deeper theoretical understanding of this question, and which shows something about the relationship of theory to practice. And it's practice, through practice, that we come to certain kinds of theoretical conclusions, and we're able to test these the theory through practice as well. So the growing theoretical development of the party gave us a deeper theoretical basis for the relationship of the party to the APSC and the struggle against U.S. domestic colonialism and for socialism within current U.S. borders. While we have only begun to scratch the surface in some of our theoretical investigations, We are excited about the breakthrough this is the quote, we are excited about the breakthrough we are making and their implications for the international revolutionary struggle against imperialism and for socialism, as well as their implications for struggle right here within current US borders. We use the term current US borders. You see, we did that a lot because the assumption, of course, is that this is a settler colony. A settler colony. Europeans came in, took this land and created these borders in the land, etc. We say they're current borders because we respect the fact that the Mexican and other indigenous people in this land and in this region, in this hemisphere, are fighting to retake their rights, their land, their resources, etc. So we say this is a temporary setup, just like the colonial domination of Black people. It's a temporary setup. We say we are winning. So U.S. Of critical importance to our studies is the significance of what the Marxists call primitive accumulation of capital in the development of capitalism throughout the world. And here's where Marx talks about this primitive accumulation. As you can see, our ongoing development of this question, around this question, helped us to understand that what Marx was defining was a different mode of production, moving from feudalism to a different mode of production that gets skated over and talking about a primitive accumulation of capital. This is a really important point that is going to be prove to be much more important as we have an opportunity to continue to look at that. It's extremely important. So this primitive accumulation was actually the brutal plunder and pillage of various non-European territories and the bloody enslavement and massacre of indigenous people in the process by various European states. The enslavement and plunder of natural resources provided these European societies with an accumulation of resources and capital, which led to great changes within. The stolen wealth heard the emergence of a challenging, powerful class in Europe. That class that would own and control the new factories which were springing from the European soil that had been made fertile with the blood of African slaves and other victims of European progress. This powerful class would become the new ruling class, the capitalist class, given birth by the new dynamics brought to European society by primitive accumulation. Along with this new capitalist class, there would emerge the European working class, those whose livelihood was determined by their ability to sell their labor power to the capitalists, those who were the actual producers responsible for transforming the raw materials and goods stolen from the peoples of the world into sellable goods, into commodities. You know, this is clearly a description of a mode of production that was born. If you look at, the description that we give here, this is how the world now comes to get its living, how the world is engaged in producing and reproducing life. And this was easily understood, it seems, when people were talking about the struggle within what they characterize as the capitalist mode of production. When you see that the capitalist class lived off of the stolen value of labor from the working class, and everything that was accumulated, that was acquired through the so-called capitalists, beyond what they had to pay the workers for reproduction of their capacity to work, was called profit. This was profit. This was the driving force, profit. But the thing is that here you have a social force that comes into being and defines the world based on its significance in its consciousness of itself and its place in the world. It does not say that slavery gave birth to us. And if I saw something yesterday. Question was asked of whether or not Marx talked about hate, because he had to know about hate. Hate was a major thing. And you will only find a minuscule reference at some point by Marx about hate. and it was not respected as a revolutionary occurrence with implications for the whole world. It was just this thing that happened in the Caribbean. It was the slave rebellion like that, when it was the critical question. So anyway, the issue of primitive accumulation, the issue of the existence of a mode of production that is invisible. It's invisible to those who control the world. Otherwise, they would have to define their own significance, obviously in a much more minimal way. So the stolen wealth heard the emergence of a challenging, powerful class in Europe, a class that would own and control the new factories, etc. This powerful class will become the new ruling class, the capitalist class, given birth by the new dynamics brought to European society by primitive accumulation. Along with this new capitalist class, there will emerge the European working class, those whose livelihood was determined by their ability to sell their labor power to the capitalists. So the enslaved colonizer were much less free, could not sell the value of our labor power. It was captive, which is why the term wage slavery came into being. Who were the wage slaves? Wage slavery was the way that Europeans defined themselves progressively in relationship to their ruling class, but it took that definition, it borrowed from the existence of a real slave, as Marx said, that wage slavery in Europe required as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. So it does not take more than a casual glance to see that although there have been modifications in the relationship Europe has to the rest of the world, although there have been some modern adjustments to cover historical origin, the primitive accumulation which gave birth to the present form of European society and civilization still exists today. And the death-dealing parasitic relationship has not been broken. It is also true that Africans provided and still provide the U.S. with the essence of its primitive accumulation in the form of our free and near-free labor, which also provides various sociological, political, and ideological benefits for the dictatorship U.S. capitalist, for the dictatorial U.S. capitalist colonialist ruling class and state. A particular function of the presence of African people in the United States, whose condition of existence constitutes domestic colonialism, has been to obscure the class contradictions which exist between the U.S. North American working class and its ruling class. That is to say, the U.S. ruling class hides behind the contradiction of African colonialism from its working class. And here also, brings to mind this whole issue when the rise of capitalism and capitalist democracy, as it was characterized, bourgeois democracy, where the dictatorship is hidden, as they put it. They say the hidden dictatorship. They say the dictatorship exists within the capitalist system, but it's a hidden dictatorship, which means that the workers don't recognize the dictatorship, or people don't recognize the dictatorship in the same way it's recognized with enslaved people or people who are colonized. It has been a theory of primitive accumulation which has led the party to deeper understanding of the implications of our colonial situation in the struggle for socialism within current U.S. North American borders. Why are we spending this kind of time here? Why are we, refuting these assumptions by Marxists and leftists and things like that? It's because it's part of the overall ideological struggle that we're engaged in to liberate our people, to bring clarity and science to the struggle that we're involved in, and because despite the fact that there are white workers and poor people, et cetera, who exist on the earth, they exist on this platform, the oppression and exploitation of Africans and other colonized peoples. And it's because of the colonial mode of production. You have the colonizers, those forces who control the mechanisms of education, of economy, all this stuff, and define the world. So the whole world is being defined in this fashion. I used to travel internationally and would go to different places during this period of time and had to battle folk who should be our friends because we didn't have the resources to travel and be there to define our reality. Who they were talking to was white leftists from the United States who were just saying what Black people were about, what the struggle was about, and things like that. This is part of what I'm talking about in terms of controlling the resources that define us. And so even African people, Vietnamese people, other peoples around the world succumb to the definition of reality as imposed on the world by the colonizer. And the problem is that it was not workable, which is why there's such a thing as Mao Zedong fault. And which not only influenced the Chinese Revolution, but the Vietnamese Revolution too. And, yeah. So it has been a theory of primitive accumulation that has led our party to a deeper understanding of the implications of our colonial situation in the struggle for socialism within current U.S. and North American borders. It has been the theory of primitive accumulation, combined with the struggle to resolve the contradictions within the Solidarity movement, which has led the African Socialist Party to understand that the structured relationship between the party and APSC is exactly. It is a concrete reflection of our theoretical understanding of the political and social reality presented to us by capitalism and colonialism in the US. The party has always understood that no theory for the liberation of our people can be subordinate to the promise of North American solidarity. It may be necessary to win our liberation independent of any strategic relationship with progressive North Americans. The struggle for independence through self-liberation, thanks to the primitive accumulation factor, will undoubtedly set the vast majority of North Americans against us, creating a probability of our struggle for independence assuming the form of race war. I no longer believe that's necessarily a probability. I think that we've seen, fundamental development as a consequence of the creation of APSC and how that is affecting things in the real world. So we talk about how practice informs theory, and theory is tested through practice. I mean, there's 170 or so cities in the United States with representatives or white people, colonizers, as a part of the Solidarity movement, who are having effects on the situation in the United States beyond what is recognized by many people who call themselves activists, etc. I mean, the reparations demand has spread profoundly, even since the founding of the African National Reparations Organization in 1972, in 1982. That the Solidarity forces, some of whom came into, became connected to our party through that reparations work and reparations tribunal, like these forces working like termites, just eating away at the structures and things like that of the system, winning people everywhere. And also this attacks the isolation of the African liberation movement, because they don't just run around saying reparations, they do that, but they also give the basis for the demand for reparations. They call on the colonizers, individuals, to engage in the struggle to overturn this colonial relationship. So that people who do reparation work, they don't understand necessarily why suddenly there are so many forces now able to deal with the reparations question. There are thousands of people, literally, who come through our institutions on a regular basis and hearing reparations on a regular basis as a consequence of that. So anyway, I've talked too long about that. So let me see what we're looking at in terms of time. So it's with the theory primitive accumulation. The party's always understood a struggle of independence and self-liberation. So here we are, more as socialists. We had to face the practical problems which are blocking the struggle for socialism within current U.S. borders, namely domestic colonialism. Indeed, the struggle to defeat domestic colonialism is the fundamental practical problem confronting every genuine socialist within current U.S. border. All these people who talk about they are socialists, and all of them who call themselves they are Marxists. They are Marxists, except when it comes to recognizing the viability, the validity of the statement by Marx that wage slavery in Europe requires as a pedestal slavery pure and simple. They're Marxists and socialists until it comes to the necessity of recognizing that there can be no socialism without overturning this mode of production of colonial power. Therefore, what is becoming clear to us is that there's a false dichotomy that has been created here, so that there is a quote unquote black movement and that takes care of the black thing, and then there are the white leftists and the white anti-imperialists, et cetera, that takes care of something else. But the point is, if they're taking care of something else, that something else is the majority of every damn thing. And that's what we're confronted with. And so what we're saying is the key to victory, the key to the liberation of the oppressed and toiling masses of the world, the key to dealing with the issue of the oppression and exploitation of the peoples, however that is defined, homosexual rights, women's rights, however it's defined, is the colonial question. And therefore, we can claim without hesitation that the African People's Socialist Party is the leader of the struggle for socialism. Because they can't have any socialism as long as colonialism continues to exist. It ain't gonna be no socialism. That's what we talk about when we say that this is an uneasy equilibrium. There's a contest between the past and the future. And the past is a past of oppression, exploitation. The past is a past of this existing pedestal upon which wage slavery exists. Therefore, it becomes clear to us that the political and strategic basis for the existence of APSC and its ideological and structural relationship through the party were also grounded in a firm theoretical basis. It is a theoretical basis which is consistent with our long-term perception, understanding that a victorious struggle against colonialism would provide the basis and conditions for an immediate struggle for socialism, and that within that fact lay the basis for objective unity between African people and the progressive working class North American people. We can mess with that somewhat, but the point is that the objective relationship is that the working class is going to have to, as it's characterized, going to have to function under the leadership of the African Revolution. There is no other way forward. That is not simply a matter of fighting for white rights. Now our continuing theoretical development has led us to conclude further that a successful struggle against domestic colonialism is an absolute necessary prerequisite for a successful struggle for socialism. This theoretical development helped the party to have a deep appreciation for APSC and to understand that the structural relationship of African and North American people to the struggle against US domestic colonialism and for socialism were correctly reflected in the structural relationship between the party and APSC, unquote. So the party's work in the international arena reflected in the messages of solidarity to and actual participation in our first Congress by representatives from Colombia, El Salvador, Tanzania or South Africa, Nicaragua, Grenada, Chile, Argentina, Vietnam, and Barbados. These were revolutionary parties, revolutionary organizations who were forced to recognize the significance of the African People's Socialist Party as a revolutionary force that was engaged in attacking the foundation of the whole world colonial system located right here in the United States. Subsequent to our Congress, we have deepened our relationship with the Frente Sandinista de la Liberación Nacional or the FSLN in Nicaragua, established relations with the Irish Republican Socialist Party, and launched, although not without some contradictions, an effort to build the African Socialist International. Moreover, within the US, we are struggling to deepen our relationship with the Diné people who are locked in fierce battle with US colonialism at Big Mountain in Arizona, and with the colonized Mexican people through our dear comrades in the fraternal organization of Unión del Barrio. It should be clear as we approach our second party Congress where we have much to be proud of as a party. Moreover, our accomplishments are concrete, and their significance can therefore be measured concretely. Not the least of our accomplishments has been the party's first Congress held in Oakland in 1981. This may be the first Congress ever held by a Black Revolutionary Party in the history of our movement against US colonialism. I subsequently learned that that was incorrect, that the African People's Party did have a Congress preceding our first Congress. It was a precedent that immediately created rank and file pressure for Congress within at least one other organization, which is generally thought of as a part of our tendency. I'm talking about the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The unwillingness of the organization to open itself up to membership through a Congress was one of the factors which led to a split within its ranks, one of the splits. The significance of the party Congress has already been briefly addressed within this article. However, it must also be said that another significance of the Congress that demands it be held when conditions allow is that it puts the party in the hands of its membership by allowing the membership to elect its leadership and fight for the party's basic policies, direction, and line. More than anything else, this process, which includes pre-Congress activities, allows the party membership to experience possession of its own party and the line in politics which it represents. The Congress is the highest body of the party and is fundamental to the struggle against spontaneity and commandism, something reflected in one organization's unwillingness to hold a Congress or even have a constitution, preferring instead a policy of leadership through memo. This is what All African People's Revolutionary Party used to say. They couldn't hold a Congress. They didn't have a constitution. They had what they call a leadership through memo. I don't know if that's changed at all. I think there's still remnants of the organization. Perhaps the party's greatest accomplishment has been the 14 years we have published the Burning Spear. This was 86. Founded in 1968 by the Hunter Militant Organization's JOMO, one of the founding organizations of the APSC. The Burning Spear has been a mainstay of the Black Revolution, maintaining not only the presence of the party subsequent to the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s, but also the presence of the Black Revolution itself. These are but a few of the factors which figure into our many strengths and the promise of an excellent and promising future as we approach our second Congress. These are the factors which have contributed to the slow but definite movement toward the party by many persons who have previously been ensconced within various political tendencies and formations, which have not resulted in any movement toward transforming our material reality, enhancing the fighting capacity of our people, or concrete application of theory. We used to say that, theory that cannot be applied is meaningless. So you got a theory and you can't apply it. If it's not something that can be applied, it's meaningless. It is here that our weaknesses have potential for turning our strengths into their opposite if we do not give them the most serious attention. How are we doing, Comrade Director?
Chairman, I think that we should probably read up to, because we're just a little over. So I'm just trying to find a good stopping point. I would say I'm sorry?
You can signal me.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, so the significance of the party congress has already been briefly addressed. Let's see, where are we on here?
Some of these weaknesses have been spoken of before on page 11.
Page 11, some of these weaknesses have been, on the bottom, have been spoken of before. The most outstanding problem has been the rationalization of the party structure. In a paper prepared for July 1983 National Conference on the Current Situation, this problem was summed up in this manner. I'm really glad to be able to read this because part of what we do is that we present here, like all of these documents and what have you that, trace the significance of the party. And even these documents by themselves contribute to the development of the African liberation movement. And you would be hard pressed to find any organization that has produced, this kind of work, solving the problems of the revolution and discussing this in the process of doing that, discussing this in the process of tackling contradictions, which we were confronted with as a revolution. It's not just something that shows how poorly African people may be doing at any given time or our courage on the battlefield or something to that effect, but actually how the movement is occurring that would liberate our people. What has to be done? What's working? What's not working? What has to be done? This is who the African People's Socialist Party is. The objective, of course, is to solve the problem of the revolution and not just to get more views for ourselves. So we say that this is a national conference on the current situation. And this problem was summed up in this manner. Quote, rationalization of our leadership structure as called for by the party constitution. All unfilled offices of the political bureau must be filled. Otherwise, the political bureau will continue to suffer from a workload greater than its capacity and will ultimately pose a threat to democratic centralism within the party and the political integrity of the Central Committee. We ain't just started talking about the political bureau. The current political bureau leadership must become more strategic in approach to specific areas of work under individual leadership and to party programs in general. Long-term planning, particularly within the various departments, is a necessary hedge against intra-party spontaneity and organizational opportunism. I want to say something about this issue of spontaneity because we talk about it all the time. And when we talk about spontaneity, whether we are aware of it or not, we are talking about theory. And we are talking about tactics and strategies. This is theory and the tactics and strategies born of theory, which gives coherent leadership, ongoing leadership to what it is that we do. If you don't have that, then whatever you do is all right, more or less, or not all right. You just do stuff, which is what much of the movement has been around, which is one of the reasons that we founded the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, because we had a quote unquote movement that was just doing stuff, but it didn't mean it was contributing to a revolution. So people are acting spontaneously, and what that means is, it's been said that spontaneity is the mother of opportunism. And by opportunism, what we mean is sacrificing the long-term objectives of the revolution, sacrificing the long-term aims of the revolution. But if you don't have a theory, you don't have no long-term aims. If you don't have tactics and strategy, you don't have no long-term aims. You just do stuff. And if you're just doing stuff, you may be impacting negatively the long-term aims that you ought to be fighting for, which is what we run into all the time when sometimes people jump in and just start doing stuff and say, Black Lives Matter, just doing stuff
and it's not connected to any tool at the end. And that's why we can live with that. We know people are going to do stuff like that. We want people to engage in struggles wherever they are, and this is a spontaneous struggle, but it's the responsibility of the party, the revolutionaries to intervene in the spontaneous struggles of the masses and to give it direction so that it concludes in the objectives that's necessary for making the revolution and liberating our people. So the party must also rapidly enhance our and rationalize party education for the general membership as well as the masses of the African working class. The party's form of political education curriculum became obsolete with the Florida Conference. Where an internal struggle against rightist tendencies were initiated. And the party work was informed by the slogan, from the people to the party, from the party to the people. Subsequent to this, there has been a haphazard approach to political education. The various levels of party organization have not assumed the proper roles and functions of political education. For me, this is a major failure on my part. I have thought at different times to have solved that problem. I know I have created different kinds of structures and processes that should engage all the time, should be constantly engaged in political education for the people in the party, training party forces. Even this pamphlet is a part of that process that we're talking about, the study that we have now. But this it continued to be a critical issue because there can be no democracy. That's why you got people who are members of the so-called Democratic Party, and the Republican Party, the Green Party, and all these other organizations. But they do not have the kind of political education that would give them the ability to have democratic participation in changing the world. And for the kind of party we are, political education is critical because it means the working masses, people who are usually not even considered as having the intellectual wherewithal to participate in some of these discussions. That's why we in North St. Louis bringing discussions to the community around critical issues and questions around Russia and Ukraine. Here, people in St. Louis who are just fighting in what they call food deserts. And so there's an assumption that people are not supposed to even be engaged in discussions around critical questions, solving problems of their lives. There can be no democracy if the masses of the people are not equipped to participate. That's why the colonial power will keep people dumbed down so that you don't understand what's happening in your relationship with the rest of the world. Because you don't have the ability to participate effectively in saying, this must change. We can change this and how it can happen. Anyway, this conference reaffirms the party's understanding and that political education among the membership is the foundation of internal party democracy, and political education among the African working class is the only means by which the masses can determine whether the party is maintaining its integrity as the advanced detachment of the class and national liberation struggle. That's why you can be in North St. Louis as an example. You can have African people who are in the government who get arrested for taking bribes and doing other kinds of stuff, and there's sympathy in the African community often for them. Why? Because there's sympathy for them because they're Black people and they know that the government lock up Black people all the time for no reason, et cetera, et cetera. That's just the way it is. Black people get locked up by the government. And so it's easy, it's necessary for the people to have the kind of political education so that they can make a distinction. Like it's different. If any of those people had been arrested or charged with doing something that was going to help the Black people, help the revolution, not a single one of them was charged with taking a bribe so that they can build a basketball court for Black people. Not a single one of them was charged with taking a bribe so they could build a healthcare center for African women. Not a single one of them was charged with taking a bribe so they can bring economic development to the black community. It's just for their own black asses. You see, and this is, the thing is that the people need to be able to make a distinction. Yes, you're right, it's colonial justice that locked them up, and these guys are pipsqueaks. They are not worth the pimples on a gnat's ass when it comes to corruption, in St. Louis. I mean, you're in the heart of corruption in St. Louis. You have governors who've been kicked out, you've got other people who've been kicked out. Millions and billions of dollars have just left the African community going to these white guys. And so you're right, the masses are really right when they recognize that these chumps are nothing but you know, one of these guys, you got a picture of him going to court where he's going to get his sentence with his fur-lined coat on, etc., like some kind of Mac Daddy. You know, which is a statement of you know, whoa, you know, this, I mean, if you're going to be a damn crook, you know what I'm saying? Be a Capone crook, you know, be a Joe Biden or Hunter Biden crook. You know what I'm saying? But these, you know, these guys can't even make good crooks. You know what I'm saying? They just penny actors, and the African masses need to be able to make a distinction. They need to say, I'm ashamed at these penny ass crooks. You know, what kind of crook are you? They should, they should see him and throw rocks at him for being a penny crook. Be a big time crook or something like that. You know what I'm saying? But the people need to be able to make a distinction. And there's some, you know, here, this political education mass is a critical thing. So, the party must develop a more scientific approach to utilization of our meager resources, consciously concentrating more of these resources in the areas where party organization and programs are already in place. The party must deepen the coordination and relations and rationalization of the relationship between local, district, regional committee, and the central committee, political bureaus, and other party organizations and institutions. The resource question, I think we got a better grip on. Not the best grip, because too few resources are going to the political work. And too few resources going to the political work, and that used to be a massive area. That's when you saw most of the development of the party, when the resources were going to the political work. When I traveled all around the world, building organizations throughout the United States, building organizations, winning people to the party, that's when much of the political development of the party and organization was happening. But so we have better control of the resource, better direction in some ways, but there's still work that has to be done, and that's something that has to happen with our structures that I'm fighting for. The party must develop a comprehensive recruitment program and implement it within our party organization. Seems like this is 86. The party must purge its membership roles of all party members who prove unable or unwilling to exist and function as members in good standing as determined by the party's constitution, rules of party discipline, and organizational manual of the African People's Socialist Party. Although some of these problems are still with us, all of them do not affect us in the same way or with the same significance as in 1983. I'm quoting from a 1983 document here. For example, some of these problems will begin to be resolved with the Congress itself, which will elect leadership for the various offices called for by the Constitution. And the question of rationalization of party education is currently being addressed, with some party organizations currently involved in intensive daily political education, which utilizes the party standards of education curriculum. But we have organization in the party whose responsibility is this education stuff that I'm talking about. It's not just something that's out there. There's organization. And I want to say that what we will learn or should learn, familiarity with the party constitution, et cetera, and practice demonstrates that the party works through committees. It's committees. When we are most effective, it's because we have committees. Not just because they are good individuals. Somebody raised the question with me, and it often gets raised because it's a practical, material contradiction or reality. People talk about things like who's going to replace me as the leadership of the party. Is leadership in place for the party? That's the wrong question. The real question is whether these committees that's supposed to function to provide leadership of the party are being fought for, whether we put in the resources where they should be to make these committees work, whether we simply call on the committees to do things without providing the same intensive kind of leadership and provisions and resources that we provide, for example, like for the economic work. That we have to have this because it's within the committees that we reproduce leadership all the time. The leadership is being produced, the leadership is being exercised. If you don't have that, you got nothing. It doesn't matter if you choose somebody who's going to take my place if I walk out again and get hit by a truck or the FBI decide to finish off what they threatened on July 29th. You understand what I'm saying? Committees. It's the dynamic relationships, it's the dynamic dialectical process that should happen within the African People's Socialist Party. Committees. These committees give responsibility to the committee leaders and participants to do in the areas of your responsibility the same thing, or at least what I am required to do in terms of the international work of the party. This is the whole concept of the cell. When you talk about different cells or different units, if we might be characterized, inside a cell is the actual building blocks for the whole organism. It's located in the cell. That's why we structure a so-called unit in a certain way so that you cannot kill off this thing, even if you kill a particular leader, because it's always engaged in a process of reproduction. I forgot, I've read someplace at one time about how the cells constituting the skin shed every, so frequently, but you seldom are you found without the skin. It's because the reproduction is always going on. It's always being reproduced. And that's the thing that we build into the party when we understand who we are, what we're supposed to do, and the fact is that we lead through committees. That's what we mean when we say that a critical aspect of party life is collective leadership. Committees that we require to function the way they're supposed to function, and that we make it easier for them to do by providing the kind of ongoing training that's necessary. Training within the committees, training within the party as a regular basis so that people can elevate themselves consciously and know what the hell it is they're doing in the process of elevation. Don't you think so? So, somebody tell me where I was.
Chairman, you're at the fact is on page 13. The fact
And so you tell me that you intervened because you want me to shut up.
No, I want you to finish this page and then we'll.
And then shut up.
and then shut up now.
The fact is that even as the quantity and quality of our tasks grow, party members suffer from a serious lack of theoretical development and organizational training. This, you see some seesawing, with this all the time, particularly when we don't have the constant, incessant process of political education that we created. We built that, we created that. We created whole curriculums for political education that lasts for months and months. You can have political education. We created a process through which, on a local level, even coming into the party, political education begins at a local level and a community level, where in a block, et cetera, all the way up to international committees. So we say that the main task of the party, to build and consolidate the party, is tied to the recognition of these difficulties as much as it is tied to building for the second party Congress. And right now, we're not just engaged in a second party Congress, we're engaged in building for the 8th Congress of our party, which is going to be the most magnificent event in African history that's going to be held in what they call South Africa in 2023. So this is the way it must be for many of our forces who are moving toward the party today. Many of the forces who are moving toward the party today are from the petty bourgeois in terms of class background. Many of them are intellectuals whose general level of theoretical development and expertise in other areas will prove invaluable to the party, which has experienced some limitations from the lack of intellectuals. We have to create working class intellectuals. This lack of intellectuals of party members whose objective class position is from the petty bourgeoisie has been one of the unusual features of our party. So you want to take it now, is that right, Comrade Director?
Chairman, look, I wasn't trying to be responsible for cutting you off because I think you would have a lot of angry people in the comments, but yeah, we're gonna stop it here. I think this will give us a good starting point, and not to worry, comrades tuning in, this will be extended into multiple episodes so that we're able to go over this whole document. So just noting that we stopped here on the top of page 14. So first, Chairman, I just really want to salute, just their brilliant leadership and recognize, as we've stated throughout this whole, really the whole reading, that this was published in 1986. And just how African internationalism, the science, the revolutionary theory really holds up, and continuing to sum up the contradictions and solving the problems of our revolution right now, because the fact is that all of the questions and things that you've spoken to, you've developed, a strategic way forward. Part of it is requiring to put it into practice, to take everything that you've laid out and you've done over more than 50 years, that is a responsibility of this party and this movement to assume. So I just really, really want to appreciate this profound study, and I definitely unite that this was just really timely. So comrades, we're going to have brief announcements, and then we'll take a couple of questions. We'll see, maybe literally might just be a couple from last week's study. Chairman, you already spoke to one of them around the Haiti question and Karl Marx, and that was presented by Comrade Paul. So thank you for addressing that question. So let's take a look at our announcements, and before we get into that Q&A. All right. So join the counteroffensive to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the African liberation struggle. Donate or volunteer to the Hands Off Uhuru, Hands Off Africa Defense Campaign today. For more information, you can go to handsoffuhuru.org to volunteer, donate, or sign the petition. And speaking of Hands Off Uhuru, make sure you save the dates for these upcoming Hands Off Uhuru campaign events. Monday, January 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern, come to the mass meeting titled Meet the Unindicted 4 Co-Conspirators. And on Saturday, January 21st at 5 p.m. Eastern, the Hands Off Uhuru Defense Campaign will host an event titled Build the Anti-Colonial Defense, Stop the Attacks on African, Puerto Rican, Indigenous, Mexican, Palestinian, and all liberation struggles. So save those dates. And again, go to handsoffahuru.org for all the information related to this campaign. And we spoke about the Burning Spear newspaper. It was mentioned here, the feat of 14 years. Well, let's add 40 years to that because Burning Spear newspaper is celebrating 54 years in print. And we want to remind everyone that you can view past issues of the Burning Spear newspaper, going all the way back to the beginning issue, by going to theburningspear.com/archive. And we encourage everyone to subscribe to the Spear. 12 issues delivered to your door or email inbox, or both. You can gift a subscription to family and friends and support the Mafundi Lake Prisoner Subscription Program by sponsoring one or more prisoner subscriptions. And you can also distribute the Spear in your community. Become a distributor, sell on the, in the community, on the corners, the Burning Spear newspaper. Go to theburningspear.com/subscribe or theburningspear.store to become a distributor of this incredible revolutionary newspaper. We're talking about creating African working class intellectuals. The Spear is going to be one of the primary organizing tools, has been for the last 54 years. So go ahead and get your Spear bundle if you haven't already, and become a Spear seller in your community today. Also, make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and support the Omali Taught Me show by donating at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. Uhuru Tours and Speakers Bureau is an institution of the African People's Socialist Party that coordinates events and tours for Chairman Omali Yeshitela and other party speakers and leaders. Book Chairman Omali and other movement speakers for your campus or organization now. You can email at info@uhurutours.com or call 727-914-3621. You want to go ahead and do that, comrades, because 2023 is already filling up and booking the chairman. So make sure you email info@uhurutours.com or call 727-914-3621. And finally, just want to say, for more events, go to theburningspear.com/events. If you're in the Uhuru movement, your organization, your institution has an event coming up, please make sure you submit them to the events calendar so that we can announce them during the Omali Taught Me Sunday Studies. And also just want to close this out by saying, to join the African People's Socialist Party, the task is to build and consolidate the African People's Socialist Party. We're not just going over this document, and the chairman is not just reading this so we can just see how brilliant this analysis and strategy is, but it's for us to adopt and to actually carry out. And we have to be members of this movement, this organization, the African People's Socialist Party. You can do that by joining. Go to apspuhuru.org to fill out that contact form. And I know I saw a comrade in Jamaica who was watching live with us already heed the call and has already filled out that contact form. So I want to salute you, comrade. Thank you so much. And we're looking forward to continuing to build the African People's Socialist Party in the Caribbean alongside you. So be like this comrade, go to apspuhuru.org, fill out that join form. All right, so that's going to conclude our announcements. And we're going to, again, take a look at just a couple of questions, Chairman, before we wrap up today. And these questions are coming from our last week's study, where we had some really great questions raised. And this was during the interview that we did with you. So this first question comes from Comrade Hector on YouTube. Says, Uhuru Chairman, in terms of colonialism, do you believe that the world political situation is strengthening or weakening national liberation movements internationally?
Uhuru, thank you, Comrade Hector. Where do you know where Hector is from? Does it say?
Yeah, it doesn't say.
Doesn't say. Okay, I was just curious because we had real powerful comrades who were part of the Mexican National Liberation Movement, and Hector was one of them. But in terms of the world political situation strengthening and weakening national liberation movements internationally, I think that the conditions really favor revolutionary national liberation movements around the world. I should say national liberation movements around the world. I think the conditions right now favor them significantly. I think the colonial mode of production, we see all kinds of evidence of this crisis surrounding the colonial mode of production. One of the weaknesses, I believe, in our movement internationally is continues to be a question of theory, and for the colonized to be able to recognize our significance as colonized people in terms of the functioning of the whole global economy and global social system. And I think that when we don't recognize that, we will find ourselves often fighting to change things that improves the system as opposed to overturning the system. People want food, clothing, and shelter and what have you. And then most of us are informed in a way that we fight for food, clothing, and shelter within the existing kind of social system, even if it means getting rid of a particular government. Sometimes it doesn't mean that we've made a major offensive against colonialism or the colonial mode of production. Of course, the colonial mode of production is a parasitic relationship, so it doesn't really matter who's in power. I mean, look at what's happening with Venezuela. Which has been impressive for a long period of time. It brought so much relief at one juncture in Cuba when Hugo Chavez became president there. And even today with Maduro and the kinds of things they're trying to change on the ground in Venezuela and the relationships they're establishing. Objectively speaking, I think all of that stuff contributes to undermining the colonial mode of production. But I think that in terms of organization, being conscious of this as a task that is involved in is a critical thing. Because you can get some of what the movements demand on the one hand without challenging the colonial mode of production, without upsetting it, without overturning the colonial mode of production. I think the conditions are much better now than they've ever been, than they've been in a very long time. Internationally, the contest that the US, China, and Russia in particular, I mentioned these three because they are nuclear powers with tremendous amounts of capacity for having their way in the world. I think they contesting this contest that China and Russia has brought to the United States, and it challenges the colonial mode of production. So the United States can't do exactly what it wants to do and used to do. The same thing's true with France and all the traditional colonial powers. So that's important. The question is whether or not there are actually revolutionary anti-colonial organizations on the ground, and whether those organizations are informed by revolutionary theory. So I think the conditions are good for that to occur. I think the political situation is good. The question that's before us is whether or not we have the kinds of organizations within the colonial world to take advantage of the conditions right now, force our will in this process. This is one of the reasons we're doing this study too, to contribute to that. I hope, Hector, I hope that was satisfactory response.
Uhuru, Chairman, and Comrade Hector, if you are watching, thank you so much for posing that question. Chairman, this last question we're going to take is from Comrade Director Chimurenga Silambao, who serves as the National Director of Organization for the party. Before I get to that, let me just read this comment. Comes from username tag 5104 on YouTube, says, Uhuru, I have been supporting the party through St. Petersburg, such clarity of purpose. Chairman Omali has a doggedness that is unassailable. All right, so to Director Chimurenga's question, says, Uhuru, Chairman, would you say that the colonial mode of production exists alongside the capitalist mode of production?
Well, does the colonial mode of production exist alongside the capitalist mode of production? I think the capitalist mode of production exists inside the colonial mode of production.
Oh, that was
I
very
don't know if you can make it alongside. Does an unborn embryo live alongside the, the pregnant woman? I think that's what we're looking at,
Yeah, Uhuru, well.
That's where it gets all of its nutrients and everything that keeps it alive. Well, that's what we want to do is attack Roe versus Wade and force an abortion.
Uhuru. Well, I Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. Oh, and want to say, Comrade Hector is from the Mexican Liberation Movement in California, says Uhuru comrades from the Mexican Liberation Movement.
Uhuru. Oh, Hector. Good to hear from you, compa.
Uhuru. All right, Chairman, and we talked about international solidarity in the same section that we reviewed as well. So thank you, comrades. Oh, I didn't mention where people were watching from, but wanted to acknowledge particularly Swaziland, comrades in occupied Azania, and I mentioned comrade in Jamaica who signed up to join the party today. So Uhuru comrades.
Did you mention where people were watching from?
No, I didn't mention where people were watching.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
all right.
so I was acknowledging some of the locations we have on Swaziland, occupied Azania.
Uhuru, Swaziland, we're gonna win this one. Uhuru.
Chairman. All right, so I want to just thank comrades and of course you, Chairman, for leading this brilliant study, and want to thank everybody for your questions. Again, I'll say it, do not fret. We will be continuing this as a series of Build and Consolidate, and taking your questions. So if you had them today and you put them in the chat, our chat moderators did log them, and we'll be able to review them and take them in our next study. So thank you, comrades, so much for your participation in this incredible Sunday study. And I just want to turn it over to you, Chairman, just for some closing remarks. So Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrades, I just want to thank everybody for coming on. And I want to remind, especially members of the party and its various expressions, that our task is very serious. And right now, the objective is to grow our capacity to do what we've promised the peoples of the world that we're going to do. And that's to end this relationship with this horrible colonial mode of production so that all the people can be free. And I just want to remind people, when we talk about colonial mode of production, we're not simply talking about a policy of a colonial power. We're talking about a way within that wherein all of the peoples on earth, for the most part, try to exist and create and recreate human life. All of the spiritual and material, the legal, cultural, the way that life is defined comes from a particular mode of production. In this instance, is colonial and parasitic. It sucks the blood and resources from all the colonized peoples of the world and transfer these resources to the colonizers. And in this situation, it also creates contradictions there that must be taken advantage of. So thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and build a party. Let's go ahead and build this revolutionary project. Let's get free. Uhuru. He's with it too.
Uhuru, Chairman. Uhuru. This has been such a dynamic study. The chairman has, just this fire, this energy, and it reminds me of what station manager Eddie Maltzby from Black Pride 96 says when he gets on air: "Get up out that bed," and you just have. Uhuru, Chairman, thank you for bringing the fire today, and I want to salute this incredible discussion that we've been able to have, and also salute to the incredible Omali Taught Me show team that makes this whole production happen. And whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, we're glad to have you on with us. I want to thank again the chairman, this Build and Consolidate pamphlet, which everybody should have access to, and remind people to follow the chairman on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to the Burning Spirit TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday study. Uhuru, comrades, vanguard up. Relentless. Uhuru. Uhuru. Hands off Uhuru.
Hands off Africa.